So compound sentences is two or more simple sentences joined together by a comma and coordinating conjunction. A semicolon may sometimes be used instead of one of those conjunctions. So we had like two simple sentences, and when they are joined together we have a compound sentence. India has over 1 billion people. We have joined it by a comma, and it is expected to reach 1.5 billion by 2050. So what we have here, we have two simple sentences which are joined together, and they make one compound sentence. Or we can have again those two simple sentences that can be joined together by a semicolon. India has over 1 billion people. It is expected to reach 1.5 billion by 2050. So, what are coordinated conjunctions? Coordinated conjunctions are and, but, for, nor, or, and, so. Coordinated conjunctions can join words, phrases, and clauses. When coordinating conjunctions join clauses, they form compound sentences. A comma generally comes before the conjunction in a compound sentence. In compound sentences, if the subject of the two clauses is the same, a pronoun is often used in the second clause. So let's discuss these coordinating conjunctions in more details. For example, we have the coordinating conjunction and shows additional information. For example, China has a huge population and it is growing. We have the coordinating conjunction but and yet. Both but and yet show contrast. But is more common in spoken English. For example, Argentina is a large country, but it has a small population. We can also say Argentina is a large country, yet it has a small population. 4. As a conjunction, it means because. For is formal. It is more common in writing than in speaking. Population growth is a problem for the earth, has limited resources. Nor joins two negative statements. The word order of the clause with nor changes. The appropriate auxiliary verb must come before the subject in this case. Norway is not large, nor does it have a large population. And the second example here is Norway is not large, nor is it overpopulated, or shows a choice between two possibilities. For example, government can ignore the problem, or they can help to solve it. So it's the choice between ignoring the problem and helping to solve it. And so as a conjunction, so means as a result or therefore. For example, China is trying to slow its population growth, so it has put limits on family size. So what we have here, we have so, which means as a result of something, and therefore we have something else. We have this example which says that China is trying to slow its population growth, so it has put limits on family size. Coordinating conjunctions with words and phrases. Coordinating conjunctions can also join words, phrases, and clauses within one sentence, and, but, yet, and or are often used to join two or more verbs, nouns, adjectives, and so on. No commas are used with two words, two phrases, or clauses. For example, we have the structures. The verbs, today the word produces enough food and can nourish every human. We have the noun, problems with food involve distribution and diet. We have the adjective here, people everywhere are eating beef, which is harder and more expensive to produce than other foods. Adverbs, we can eat simply but adequately. We have the phrases as we discussed before. Today, hunger is not caused by scarcity or by overpopulation. And the clauses, in the future, hunger will be worse because the population is growing and because diets are changing. Let's discuss the complex sentences. Complex sentences are sentences that have a main, an independent clause, and at least one dependent clause. A main clause has a subject and verb and can stand alone. It is a complete sentence. A dependent clause also has a subject and verb, but it is alone it is not complete. It depends on the main clause. For example, we have the example here. The UN was created because world leaders wanted to meet. Here we have the main clause, which is the UN was created, and the dependent clause, which is because world leaders wanted to meet. Let's go further and discuss the complex sentences. We have the simple sentence, which have one clause, one subject-verb combination, and the example is the United Nations was created in 1945. World leaders wanted to discuss major problems. So we have two simple sentences which have one subject-verb combination. On the other hand, the complex sentences have at least two clauses and two subject-verb combinations connected by subordinating conjunction. For example, the United Nations was created in 1945 because world leaders wanted a place to discuss global problems. The second example is because world leaders wanted a way to discuss global problems, they helped to create the United Nations. And third example is the UN was created so that world leaders could meet to discuss global problems. Incomplete sentences are dependent clauses. Alone dependent clauses are incomplete sentences. Some of the words begin dependent clauses are although, because, and when. For example, when the United Nations was created, because leaders wanted to meet so that leaders could meet to discuss problems, and although the United Nations began with only 50 countries. So all these are examples of incomplete sentences. Types of adverb clauses. In a complex sentence, the dependent clause is connected to the main clause by a subordinated conjunction, such as when, because, although, and if. English has a number of subordinating conjunctions. Each shows a different relationship between the two clauses. In this chapter today, we will study some clauses of condition, contrast, purpose, reason, and time. Types of adverb clauses. We have different types of dependent clauses in this example. We have condition, and the common subordinating conjunctions are if and unless. And the example here is, if a country doesn't have a resource such as oil, it must import the resources. Contrast or a concession, although, even though. Sometimes imported goods are very inexpensive, even though they are taxed. Purpose, it's so that countries often tax imports so that they can protect national industries. Reason, it's because, and we have the example, some imported goods are expensive because the taxes on them are high. And time, after, before, until, since, when, whenever, while, as. Some countries tax imports only until their own industries are strong, and when a country imports more than it exports, it has a trade deficit. Clauses of time and condition for present of unspecified time. When we use when, the simple present tense is usually used in both clauses in these sentences. Modal auxiliaries may also be used. The dependent clause might begin or end this sentence. Use a comma after a dependent clause that begins with the sentence. For example, when I plan a trip, I always get as much information as possible. And the second example here is I ask a lot of questions when I visit the travel agency. Whenever. When you use whenever. Whenever is similar to when, but it is used to emphasize the idea of any time or every time. Whenever I travel, I get very excited. If. Sentences with if are familiar to sentences with when or whenever, but if gives added meaning